win tonight in Miami.
so
How
much.
are you feeling right now?
Calm, chilled. It's good to get the win, but there's a lot I could have done better. So yeah, mixed emotions.
Like what?
Could have done a lot better. Cut the ring off. Maybe done what I done in the sixth, in the third, in the second, even in the first. But a win's a win, and that's why we're here talking now.
You talked about having the weight of the boxing world on your shoulders, and like the purists, right?
Yeah, the
And
pugilists.
how do you deal with that type of pressure when the media is so fickle? 1 minute they love you, 1 minute they hate you. Do you feel that even though you won tonight, they're still not going to be pleased?
So with the media, how I operate the media is you got negative and you got positive. So I do honestly focus on the positive. I don't really focus on the negative. And secondly, I just understand that while I'm in the hot seat, so let's say there's a seat, and right now I'm elevated to that hot seat, I gotta take all the shit that comes with being in that hot seat. And then once I move on from that hot seat, no one's gonna care about me anyway. I just gotta.
That's not true.
It's true. It's how it goes. It's how it goes. So I know how it works. I understand the cycle. I'm currently in that motion. I'm dealing with some shit at the minute, but it won't last forever. Have some tough skin, and then in a couple of years, I'll be sitting back watching someone else deal with that shit.
Thank you,
Come on,
guys.
Chan, have some tough skin. You'll be alright.
All right.
Oh, good,
Well,
yeah.
thank you so much
Good
for
to
your
see
time.
you, Michelle.
Great to see you too.
Bye, fans. God bless.
What was it, about an hour ago? So I guess everything's calmed down a little bit. I thought it was a bitch move, if I'm honest, because anytime an attack like that is like premeditated.
The atmosphere surrounding the event was thick with a tension that transcended the usual pre-fight jitters. It was a collision of two distinct universes that arguably never should have met within the squared circle. When Anthony Joshua stepped into the ring to face Jake Paul, the world watched with a mixture of morbid curiosity and genuine dread, but perhaps no one viewed the spectacle with more piercing clarity than Joe Rogan. The aftermath of the fight has left the combat sports community reeling, not necessarily because of the result, which many purists argued was inevitable, but because of the brutal, unvarnished manner in which reality finally crashed down upon the influencer-turned-boxer. For weeks leading up to the bout, Rogan had been sounding the alarm, a lone voice of reason cutting through the marketing noise, warning that there are levels to this game that cannot be bypassed with charisma or determination alone. His reaction, now that the dust has settled, has become the focal point of the post-fight narrative, revealing a side of the story that goes far beyond the knockout itself. It was a moment where the prophecy of violence was fulfilled with such clinical precision that it left even the most cynical observers in a state of shock. The narrative leading into the fight was dominated by the question of validity. Could Jake Paul, a man who had disrupted the combat sports economy and defeated aging MMA legends, actually stand toe-to-toe with a legitimate, prime heavyweight champion? According to the analysis pouring out of Rogan's camp, the answer was always a terrifying no. The commentary surrounding the event suggests that Rogan knew, with a sickening degree of certainty, that the fight would end in disaster before the gloves were even laced up. This wasn't merely a prediction based on statistics. It was an understanding of the physiological and technical gulf between a hobbyist, no matter how dedicated, and an Olympic gold medalist who has spent his life dissecting giants. The sentiment was that we were watching a slow-motion collision between hype and heavyweight reality, a train wreck that everyone saw coming but no one could look away from. When the end finally came, it wasn't just a knockout. It was a restoration of the natural order of boxing, a violent reminder that there are consequences to entering a domain where you do not belong. Inside the studio, the reaction to the knockout was reportedly explosive. Sources indicate that for Rogan, the moment Joshua's right hand connected was not just a highlight reel finish, but a moment of absolute vindication. He had allegedly been screaming into the void for weeks that this matchup was a terrible idea, a dangerous flirtation with disaster that risked permanent damage for the sake of entertainment. When that final right hand landed, detonating on Jake Paul's jaw, the studio erupted, not in celebration of violence, but in the sheer weight of the realization that the warnings had been accurate. It was the "I told you so" moment that no one actually wanted to see come to fruition because of the brutality involved. The discussion immediately shifted to the specific levels of boxing that Rogan often references. This wasn't Tommy Fury, a boxer of decent pedigree but limited power. This was Anthony Joshua, a man who constitutes the stuff of nightmares for the heavyweight division. The sheer absurdity of the matchup was highlighted by the comparison to fighting a 58-year-old Mike Tyson versus fighting one of the scariest knockout artists currently active. The margin for error against Tyson might have been slim, but against Joshua, it was non-existent. However, the narrative gets complicated and arguably more uncomfortable when dissecting the performance prior to the knockout. In a twist that shocked many casual fans, Rogan allegedly admitted that Jake Paul was performing better than the direst predictions had anticipated in the early rounds. There was a consensus that the fight might end in 2 rounds, yet Jake managed to survive until the 6th. This survival, however, was painted not as a triumph of skill, but as a testament to survival instincts. Rogan's breakdown reportedly highlighted that Jake Paul wasn't truly engaging in a boxing match in the traditional sense. He was managing distance, running, and doing everything possible to stay away from the nuclear option that Joshua carried in his right hand. The commentary suggests that while surviving 6 rounds is an accomplishment on paper, the reality of those rounds was a masterclass in delaying the inevitable. Rogan pointed out that there is a massive difference between a fighter coming to play and a fighter coming to survive. Jake's movement was decent, his slipping was adequate, and he managed to avoid the initial onslaught. But this was the calm before the execution. The technical analysis of the finish is where Rogan's expertise truly shines, dissecting the tragedy of the 5th and 6th rounds with surgical precision. The turning point, according to the breakdown, was when Anthony Joshua stopped respecting the spacing and began to cut off the ring. This is the moment the fight shifted from a spectacle to a hunt. Rogan reportedly called it in real time, noting that once the space disappeared, the space that Jake Paul relied on to feel safe, the ending was written. The breakdown of the specific knockout sequence is savage in its detail. It wasn't just a random punch. It was a setup that Joshua had been baiting. Rogan explained how Joshua manipulated Jake's guard, baiting him upstairs to raise the defense, then ripping the body to lower the hands, before snapping everything apart with a perfect 1-2 combination. It was a sequence of movements that only a fighter with thousands of rounds of experience could execute so cleanly. The analysis emphasized that Jake Paul, for all his improvements and dedication, simply had no answer for that level of trap setting. He was playing checkers while Joshua was playing 3-dimensional chess with dynamite. Then came the aftermath, a period that shifted the tone from analysis to genuine concern and bewilderment. In the hours following the devastating knockout, Jake Paul took to social media, revealing that he had suffered a double broken jaw, yet in the same breath, he called out Canelo Alvarez, demanding a fight in 10 days. This specific moment allegedly caused Rogan to lose his mind. The juxtaposition of suffering a catastrophic injury, a double broken jaw is a life-altering trauma that requires months of painful recovery, and immediately asking to fight the pound-for-pound king of boxing was labeled as madness. Sources claim Rogan viewed this not as bravery, but as a dangerous detachment from reality. It raised serious questions about the concussion and the adrenaline still coursing through Jake's system. To call for Canelo after being dismantled by Joshua is to invite a level of punishment that borders on negligent. Rogan's reaction underscored the concern that Jake Paul, despite the physical damage, still does not respect the danger he is placing himself in. The commentary noted that fighting Canelo isn't a game. Canelo himself has warned influencers not to mess around with real fighters, and Rogan echoed the sentiment, suggesting that this kind of talk is where the sport stops being fun and starts being genuinely terrifying. The commentary from Jake's own corner, specifically from his brother Logan Paul, added another layer of emotional weight to the situation. Logan expressed immense pride, pointing out the sheer insanity of the metrics. A YouTuber facing one of the baddest men on the planet, a man 40 pounds heavier and 6 inches taller, and surviving for 6 rounds. It was a framing of the event that focused on the heart and the audacity of the attempt. However, even within this praise, the stark reality of the physical toll was undeniable. The mention of the broken jaw, the rolled ankle, and the sheer exhaustion painted a picture of a man who had been pushed past his breaking point. Yet, the critique from the Rogan camp remained steadfast regarding the legitimacy of the competition. There was a pushback against the idea that Jake had proven he belongs at this level. The consensus was that while he proved he is tough and brave, he also proved unequivocally that he is not a world-class heavyweight boxer. The distinction is crucial. Being a real fighter, in terms of heart, is different from being a real boxer, in terms of skill and pedigree, a point Rogan allegedly hammered home when discussing Jake's previous opponents like Tyron Woodley, dismissing the idea that beating MMA strikers translates to boxing proficiency. One of the most chilling aspects of the post-fight analysis was the realization of how accurate the pre-fight warnings had been. Rogan had predicted the anger and motivation of Anthony Joshua. He had predicted that Joshua would be insulted by the matchup and would look to make a statement. Furthermore, the prediction regarding the specific weapon, the right hand, was prophetic. It was the exact shot Rogan had warned would shut the lights off. This accuracy lends a heavy gravity to Rogan's advice for the future. The conversation has now shifted to what's next, and the advice from the podcast host is reportedly stark: stop. The suggestion is that Jake needs to take a massive step back, heal fully, and stop chasing these nuclear threats for massive paychecks.